And it was this point where I looked around, and the man opposite me was so poorly. He was on some sort of life support system, and it was shaking him. His whole body was shaking. And every so often they would take him off, and they would speak to him, but he couldn't communicate. The only way he could communicate was via blinking. And I said to myself, the first thing I said to myself was, I'm so lucky I'm alive. And as I said that, I began to count all the things that I was grateful for at that point. So I said to myself, I can still see. I can still hear. Cognitively, I was unaffected, so I didn't have any problems with memory. And God, in his wisdom, I'm left-handed, so it was my right-hand side, so I could write. So already what I'm beginning to do is say to myself, how can I work? How can I put food on the table? How can I feed my family? And I'm thinking, okay, so I can do work over the phone, I can see, I can talk. I hadn't lost my speech. A number of people within the ward couldn't speak, or their speech was very slurred. And as I was going through this, these words came back from a very famous speaker that I had seen in San Diego, a gentleman called W. Mitchell. I don't know if that name means anything to anybody here. Anybody heard of W. Mitchell? No? W. Mitchell had two very, very bad accidents. He was an ex-Marine. And the first accident he had, he was a biker. So he was on a bike and it hit a truck, and the truck caught fire. And his body sustained 60% burns. And then if that wasn't bad enough, he was also a pilot. So he went up in this plane, and it's the aeroflons or the machinery that deals with the landing gear had frozen. There was ice on it. And the plane crashed, and it shattered his vertebrae, and he was then paralyzed from the waist down. And Mitchell's words rang in my head, because Mitchell said, before my accident, he said, I could do 10,000 things. So I have a choice. I can concentrate on the 1,000 things that I've lost that I can no longer do, or I can concentrate on the 9,000 things I can still do. And that's what I was determined to do. Because the other thing that gave me great courage that Mitchell said, he said, in life, stuff happens. Stuff happens in life. And it's not about what happens. It's about how you deal with it. And he also talked about focus. He said, if you focus on good stuff, you get good stuff back. And if you focus on garbage, you get garbage back. Yeah? So these words of wisdom I took and I added to it. And I thought, okay, so I'm going to focus on all the good stuff. I'm going to focus on what I still have. But how am I going to do this on a day-to-day basis? So I came up with this term, language of recovery. So the idea that I would run a dialogue in my head of every moment of every day to help me and support me in getting through some very basic stuff. Does that make sense? Yeah? But then I said to myself, how am I actually going to do this? How practically am I going to put this into action? So I thought about the lines that I'd written. Do you remember the lines I'd written? When I wake up, I feel my right side? Yeah? So I thought, okay, I'm going to keep a diary. And every day, I'm going to note the good stuff. Yeah? And I thought what I would do is I would indulge you in one of the first entries that I wrote. So I was admitted on the Friday, and I wrote this entry on the Sunday. How many of you have been in hospital over weekends? Yeah. Is it the same in England? But the hospital in the weekends in England, they go to sleep. they kind of, and all the energy comes out, and it's just so quiet, you know, and there's only the on-call, and so it was quite a difficult time for me because there weren't the experts around. So this will give you some idea of my level of determination. So this is my diary entry for the Sunday, and this is my diary. So you can see I was quite diligent about writing my stuff. Can you see that? I know you're a long way away. Yeah. Okay. So this is the Sunday. Getting the right mental maps, the language of recovery. How you approach the process of recovery from anything is critical. Choose your words in the positive and with specific outcomes in mind. That way your feelings will be markedly influenced, hence your energy and strength. Example of this, I will walk again. I can see myself walking soon. I am so strong, nothing will stop me getting back to normal. Run films of yourself, getting back to normal, taking your first steps, lifting something, small steps. And here's the interesting thing. I use we because I felt I was in a community doing this with my family and my friends and health professionals. So I wrote we. We will be so successful with this, it will be a breeze. I don't know if you understand what will be a breeze. It's kind of colloquial in English, meaning it'll be very easy. Of course, it wasn't very easy. But really, what I was doing at that stage was tricking my brain, getting my brain to kind of not see it as such a huge thing. So the following day, the hospital came alive. It was Monday. And the health professionals, the experts arrived. And I had two consultants, one for stroke and one for heart, cardiologist. And this cardiologist came in, Will Wallace, and I'll never forget him. He was one of these people who carried himself in such a way that his expertise kind of just breathed from him. You know when someone walks into a room and they kind of carry themselves and they walk in with that confidence and you say to yourself, I know that you know what you're going to talk about. Yeah? That type of person. And he looked at me and he said, David, he said, you're a young, fit man, which made me feel better. Disconnect yourself from the world for 3 months. And if you get better earlier, it will be a bonus. So already I had a frame. I had an idea of how long this would take. Now, I could have said to myself, 3 months, oh, that's an age. I'm not going to be able to work. I'm not going to be able to do this. But what I did was I turned it round. I reframed it and said, 3 months. All the things I haven't been able to do because I've been so busy running around trying to do stuff, I can now just do all those things I love. Just take advantage of those 3 months. And then I was visited by my wonderful physiotherapist. I had 2 physiotherapists. And one was Jeanette Gibson and the other was Kathy Jesme. And they were truly magicians. Again, their expertise just sort of shone through. So here I am. Here's my patient chair, just to kind of anchor you to this. So this is my world as a patient. Sitting in this chair, and my arm is like this, my hand's like this. Yeah, this is my world. And I'm looking at this expert, this physiotherapist, and I'm bursting with questions. When? How? When? You know, it's like, can't get the questions out quick enough. So she looks at me and she says, David, she said, the first 2 months are critical. Sorry, not the first 2 months, first 2 weeks. First 2 weeks are critical. First 2 weeks are critical. A lot of movement can come back in the 2 weeks. And here's a beautiful use of but. But weeks, months, in some cases years, you can retrain your affected side to regain movement. So I thought, again, imagine me in this situation. I can't warm my hands like this, my arms like this. It's like this amazing sense of hope. That there's a possibility that I will no longer be like this, that I can get my life back to normal. So then she said to me, I want you to do your first exercise. So she take your affected hand. So I took my affected hand, and she said, I want you to visualize your affected hand opening. And I want you to do it like this, by opening and closing your hand like this. So I opened and closed it and opened and closed it. And she looked at me, and she could just see this puzzled look on my face. So she said to me, you won't notice anything yet. The presupposition being that something was going to happen. So I kept doing this. And little by little, over the days, my fingers began to flicker. Very, very tiny, tiny flickers. And then with 2 weeks, I was able to open my hand. And I was so excited because my arm was still paralyzed, but what I did was every time someone came into the room, I'd say, come here. And I, of course, couldn't walk, so I would stand up, and I would hold my arm like this. I said, come here, so I can just shake your hand. So the question you're probably asking yourselves at this stage is, how did I manage my mood? You're probably looking at me saying, yeah, okay, so you're very upbeat now, but surely it wasn't all like that. And it wasn't. There were some really down times. There were some times when it was really, really difficult. But what I did was I used very specific strategies to deal with it. And the first was to use the diary. So when I got frustrated, I would write the frustration. But at the same time, I would write down all the good things. So there was that contrast. And then every time I would get frustrated, so again, if I take you back to the patient chair and I'm back here, one of the most frustrating things is not being able to go to the toilet. So I'm in this chair and I've got to ring this buzzer. And then I've got to stand up, and then I've got to get into the wheelchair. And then I get into the wheelchair, and then they wheel me to the toilet. Then I've got to get out of the wheelchair, and they've got to help me onto the toilet, and then come back again. So it was it felt every time a long procedure. And here's the interesting thing. I was really blessed. I had a wonderful, wonderful medical team. That at no time did I feel that I was kind of being a nuisance. So with that frustration, what I used to say to myself, okay, I'm so lucky I'm alive, and also that I can go to the toilet, that I'm physically able to go to the toilet. So it was, again, another reframe. The other thing was, remember where Wallace talked about the 3 months I had? I thought, I'm going to make use of all this time. So I had tracts from the conference, Professional Speakers Conference in New York, and I listened to those. I had my iPad, not iPad, that wasn't that yet, but I had my iPod, so I was listening to music. I had my phone, I could call people that I hadn't spoken to for ages. And I just used the time. And the other thing I was very, very aware of, if you go back to my point about language of recovery, is about my internal voice, my internal dialogue. So let me throw this open to you. How many of you have supportive internal dialogues? How many of you wake up in the day and your voices are saying, yeah, it's going to be a great day and I'm going to do this? How many of you have voices that are good like that? Yeah? Only that many? There must be more of you, surely. And how many of you have really kind of strict ones that go, you haven't done enough today. That wasn't good enough. How many of you have that? Any more? Yeah, there are a few more of you here, aren't there, with that?